Hi, welcome everyone. Great to see some faces that I recognize. Welcome, welcome. Welcome to the Amazon Nature Tech Forum. So I'm Paige. I'm the community lead at NTC, and I'm going to start us off immediately. So thank you so much again for joining us today. This particular webinar grew out of the conversations that we started at Nature Tech Week just about a month ago in London, where Bea led a workshop, presented the report, um, the technology and trust in the Amazon report, which you can find on a variety of websites. Actually, Owen's probably going to paste it in the chat right now. It was a collaboration between Nature Tech Collective, the Amazon Investor Coalition, and Climate Ventures, all present in the room. Today is about kind of continuing the conversation that we started having at Nature Tech Week. As the report highlighted, the Amazon really doesn't lack innovation. And across the region, organizations are already building quite transformative solutions in the 4 buckets that we're going to speak about today: territorial governance, digital MRV, traceability, interoperability, and environmental integrity. The challenge is that a lot of these solutions are still very fragmented and disconnected from global finance solutions. Today, we're going to be exploring how really we bridge that gap through 4 thematic blocks. We'll have 15 minutes for each of these blocks, introduced by either Bea, Owen, or I. Um, and and then we'll move into like a final discussion or a final question and open it up with a few opportunities for you all to keep participating in this whole conversation. Um, Throughout all of this, one message stays very central. Technology can strengthen transparency, traceability, and coordination across these systems, and some organizations are already proving this. So we're going to dive into it in just about 1 minute, before which I tell you, you are all muted. But if at any point you have questions, please post them in the chat. If the speakers are able to answer them, they will. And otherwise, like I said, at the end of the webinar, there'll be plenty of opportunities to either contribute new organizations to the map or stay involved in the conversation afterwards. So again, thank you so much for being there. And I'm going to pass the mic to Owen for a first block, territory and governments, with the question is, who governs trust in the Amazon?
Hey everybody, thank you so much for being here. And yeah, we're gonna hit the ground running in the first 3 minutes. We have a tight schedule today. Good turnout. So our first block that Bay and I addressed in the paper is really around this question of territory and governance. And there's a few key questions that we wanted to cover in this section. So we see that environmental integrity and social integrity can't be separated. In the Amazon, trust is not produced only through carbon methodologies or verification systems, but it's also produced through transparent territorial governance, equitable participation, accessible information, and accountability to the communities that live in and steward these territories. The credibility of environmental markets depends not only on what is measured environmentally, but on how governance, participation, and decision-making processes are structured, tracked, and reported on. So it's my great pleasure to be able to introduce Tracey Osborne from the Carbon Justice Standard. They're working to ensure that rights, protections, procedural legitimacy, and benefit sharing accountability are built into the integrity architecture of environmental markets and not treated as afterthoughts. So I'll pass it over to you, Tracey. Thanks again for being here.
Thanks so much, Owen. It's a real pleasure to be here. So the question about technology and its role in environmental markets. Well, when we think about technology, we often think about drones, camera traps, bioacoustic sensors, remote sensing, and digital MRV systems used to monitor forests, biodiversity, and carbon. And these tools of environmental integrity are incredibly important and have advanced significantly over the last decade. But I think there's another important role for technology, and that's strengthening social integrity, which includes community leadership, meaningful community participation, rights, strong local governance, traditional ecological knowledge, equitable benefit sharing, stewardship of nature and biodiversity, and ethical partnerships. And these are the key principles of carbon justice. So at the Carbon Justice Standard Lab, we're building what I would describe as a social integrity infrastructure needed to scale community-led natural climate solutions. The reason this matters is that Indigenous peoples and local communities steward a significant share of the world's forests, biodiversity, and carbon, yet they receive less than 1% of climate finance. Part of the reason for this gap is that nature-based carbon projects are incredibly complex. They're often not aligned with community governance systems and are difficult for many communities to navigate without a project developer. So as a result, most carbon projects that involve communities are community-based rather than community-led. And by this, I mean projects that are largely designed by external actors where communities are asked to provide their free, prior, and informed consent and participate in a process that's already underway. Genuinely community-led projects remain relatively rare, and that's a challenge that we're trying to address. So one thing that I've learned from more than 20 years of research and project development is that community leadership is not a social objective. It actually helps to de-risk projects, and it's one of the foundations of permanence. Projects are more likely to succeed over the long term when communities understand them, can shape them, and see them as advancing their own interests and priorities. So while most climate tech measures carbon, we're building technology that measures and strengthens governance. Our goal is to make social integrity visible and verifiable across scale. We're doing this through the Carbon Justice Framework, which is operationalized through a multilingual AI-enabled tech platform. The first component of the framework is the Social Integrity Methodology, or SIM. And the SIM is a facilitated step-by-step process delivered through trusted NGOs and Indigenous partners. It provides capacity building that supports carbon literacy, rights awareness, governance strengthening, community life planning, and project design before any carbon contract is negotiated or signed. The second component focuses on project development. It helps project developers work alongside communities to co-design projects based on community priorities, governance systems, and development goals. That includes FPIC as an ongoing process, benefit sharing, safeguards, and environmental monitoring of forests, carbon, and biodiversity. The third component is the Carbon Justice Label. And this label is designed to make social integrity more transparent. It provides buyers with the necessary evidence that helps them distinguish projects that are genuinely community-led. The platform brings together all three of these components. It hosts educational modules, it supports translation across languages, it helps organize information, generates drafts of project design documents, or PDDs, and integrates community monitoring and reporting. It also creates a transparent process that communities, project developers, and eventually buyers can engage with. Importantly, we're approaching AI responsibly with strong attention to consent, Indigenous data sovereignty, and community control over their information. Without technology, supporting communities through these processes manually would be incredibly time and resource intensive. So the platform allows us to scale community-led project development while keeping community leadership and benefits at the center. The proof of concept for this work really crystallized in the Amazon through our collaboration with the Quechua Indigenous people of Raoux in Ecuador. Working alongside them, we co-developed the Kausai Nambi project, which means way of life in the Quechua language. It's a fully community-led project grounded in their cosmovision and life plan. Raoux governs approximately 135,000 hectares of intact rainforest that they've defended for decades against oil development and other extractive activities. While community members were already forest guardians, now through the project and their use of technology such as drones, camera traps for biodiversity monitoring, remote sensing, all of these are helping them strengthen their ability to monitor their forests, biodiversity, and carbon stocks. But what makes this project unique is not their use of technology. The key difference is that Seriaku's knowledge, governance systems, priorities, and community life plans for their future were built into the project from the start. So technology only strengthens existing governance systems and supports community leadership. It doesn't replace them. And the outcomes have been profound. Climate, ecological, and social benefits are deeply integrated and reinforce one another. Seriaku has strong ownership over the project, and because it's grounded in community leadership, it has a foundation for long-term success. For me, that's one of the most important lessons. And if we want durable climate outcomes, we need to invest not only in environmental integrity, but also social integrity. And technology can play an important role in helping us make social integrity more visible, lower the barriers to community participation, and scale community-led solutions across the Amazon and tropical forests around the world. So I'll stop right there. And if there's any questions at the end, happy to answer.
Thank you, Tracey. So well said. All right, so now moving on to the next kind of subject block, baselines and permanence. And the question being, how do we build credible long-term environmental integrity? So Bea, I'll let you introduce that one.
Well, thank you, Paige, and thank you, Tracey, for this amazing overview about the integrity strategy for carbon usage standard. In the second area of the document of our mapping of the nature attacking the Amazon, we talk about baselines and permanence. The really big thing here is that the methodological and ecological backbone of carbon projects are made of those two components, but we are still measuring it against the counterfactual, and in some cases state that we cannot directly observe, and that fundamental challenge creates fragility across the entire market. In some cases, to have high integrity, we need to have data that are continuously produced, validated, and maintained through the evolving systems of environmental intelligence. And we need to develop new ways to use baselines and methodologies to predictive modeling of deforestation, climate risk. And we understand that the technology has a critical role to play in this to make the carbon markets more credible and more durable, not just at the moment of verification, but overall the full cycle of the project. And in this context, I'm really happy to have someone from Equitable Worth here. So I would like to welcome Maena, that is going to talk to us a little bit about how Equitable Worth is applying those different methodological and technological innovations and making those environmental baselines more credible, dynamic, and resilient over time. Maena, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Bea. Thank you, everyone. Really glad to be here. Can everyone see my screen correctly? Just checking.
Yes.
Amazing. So my name is Maena. I am the technical lead on the external relations team at Equitable Earth. And maybe before we jump in, I just wanted to potentially present who we are, and then I'll sort of answer your question, Bea, and talk about baselines in more detail. So we are a global standard specialized in certifying nature-based carbon projects. We're ICBCM approved, and we've been in operations for 5 years now, received about 200 projects across 25 countries. To maybe highlight one of the first sort of differentiating factors, we assess projects across 3 core pillars. So carbon is one of them, but for us, it's not the only relevant, and maybe that resonates with some of what Tracey just spoke to, hopefully, but we also emphasize a lot livelihoods and ecological condition. And for us, a project cannot perform well on carbon while harming ecosystems and communities. And so that is also sort of foundational to the way we approach our projects. And we really have strong safeguards, but also requirements and expectations across these 3 pillars. And, coming back to your question, Bea, and I think beyond sort of that focus on 3 pillars, another differentiating factor in how the standard was built is our approach to baseline. And I think, Bea, you named one of the really core issues is that baselines are, counterfactual. It's a version of the future that didn't happen and that we can never directly observe. And so everything in our crediting will rest on that baseline. And so building a credible, up-to-date, and accessible baseline is something that's really key in the way that we operate our standard. Historically, project developers were setting their own baselines, and then they were reporting their own performance against that baseline. And so there was a structural conflict of interest in how we sort of designed or baked that, and the market grew sort of with that as the way we were operating. And so when we think about making baselines stronger, we kind of break it down into 3 core questions, which is who sets it, how does it stay true over time, and who gets to be part of this process and conversation. And so the first aspect is linked to credibility, and it's about who sets the baseline. I think the market has slowly been shifting or walking away from this self-setting baseline standard that there was for many years. But in many cases, still, projects will monitor their own results. And so with our standard, we've decided to move further with both how we set the baseline at the standard level, but also how we monitor performance against baseline. And both of these things are done at the standard level, and both are done centrally by our teams through remote sensing. So the proponent of a project isn't defining their own counterfactual, and they're not the ones sort of marking or assessing their progress against it. It's a simple shift, but it removes both the real and perceived conflict of interest that is inherently in that system and that has historically damaged trust in the market. The second really important aspect is having an up-to-date baseline. And that's a question of how, do we keep on, updating, I guess, or keeping a baseline that's true over time. So a baseline you set once and lock in for 40 years starts drifting away from reality as time goes. And that's even more of a challenge in a context like the Amazon, where we have, shifting deforestation pressures, shifting policy environments, land use shifts that are continuous. And so that drift can happen even faster. And so it's really important that we don't freeze that baseline and set it for that 40 years. We have 2 sort of different approaches to what we mean by up-to-date, depending on the project type. So we have 2 core methodologies. The first one is our M001 methodology, which is basically our restoration methodology. And here we use a dynamic baseline that's anchored to matched control plots. So the counterfactual moves with what's actually happening in comparable areas, not with an assumption, that's made years ago. I think that's quite general now in the market, and it's kind of the standard. So these dynamic baseline is where we're seeing most people going towards. But with our M002 methodology, which is our conservation methodology, the up-to-date element is really important. And so that methodology is sort of your standard RED+ methodology, where we issue risk maps, and we can probably have a separate session on how we do this, and sort of, I think the report starts to mention some of the innovative elements, with machine learning and sort of trying to understand not just simple, relationships between like distance road, but having like much more complex models that look at some social and sort of demographic elements and looking at different, so inputting that in the model. But when we develop these risk maps, we require a new baseline. Develop new risk maps every year, and we require project developers to update their baseline every 5 years. And so it's important for us to strike the balance between having an up-to-date baseline and risk map, but at the same time providing some sort of stability over a few years to project developers. And for now, that's how we're going. It might evolve, but sort of the idea is anyways to have a really regularly updated risk map that's not just set for that 40-year period. The third element that to us is really core is accessibility. And I really think that resonates with what you said, Tracey, is the difference between like FPIC and having them as having local communities as just being part of the process versus actually being key and driving the process and long term being the actual project developers themselves. And so, land restoration and conservation should not only be accessible to a handful of very well-resourced actors, and historically, you needed really technical teams to, do the whole carbon modeling process. And so that had to come usually with external members that were not necessarily part of these local communities. And so by centralizing all of the carbon work, carbon accounting, monitoring at the standard level, like we do at Equitable Earth, we allow for a lot more local communities to actually be project proponents. And so it makes it a lot more accessible for communities to develop their own projects. We're seeing this in the sort of type of clients that we're working with, where it's not your typical sort of large commercial project developers. And by taking and centralizing that element, we're really trying to drive the market in that direction. So yeah, maybe just to emphasize, a baseline is not something you validate once and then freeze and leave, as is. It's something that needs to continuously adapt. That comes from making sure that those three sort of core questions are looked at. So keeping it up to date, who's invited to the table, is super important. I think that's it on my side, Bea.
Thank you so much, Maena, for sharing more about your work. That was really clear. I'm just making a tiny note here that it's possible we have time for Q&A at the very, very end, given how well-behaved and time-kept our presenters are. But moving on to the next subject, market infrastructure and interoperability. How does integrity move through markets? Bea, with context, please.
Well, this context on the publication is really focused on generating credible environmental evidence. That is something that we need, but at the same time is not sufficient. Integrity also depends on what happens to the evidence as it moves to the registries, financial system, and digital infrastructure layers, because the environmental markets increasingly require not only credible projects, but also some credible infrastructure ecosystem that are capable of preserving the trust of those environmental assets can move across multiple actors and ecosystem. In this subject, we understand that transparency is not only about environmental monitoring, despite this being super important. It's also about how this environmental information signals move through the ecosystem, where those systems are open, interoperable, and accountable. The future of environmental markets may depend not only on scaling transitions, but also building those infrastructures that are capable of coordinating ecological integrity across distributed systems. And to explain a little bit more about how we can have this, we are really happy to have David Fortson from Regen network to talk about how the distributed interoperable market infrastructure can look in practice, because they already have on Regen network a few architectures for this subject, and how they are building these technologies to allow environmental integrity to survive this movement across markets from the field to the last transaction. David, you have the word to explain a little bit more for us.
Happy to do that. Good morning, everyone. I'm Dave Fortson. I'm calling in from sunny Santa Barbara, California. I am the Chief Operating Officer over at Regen Network Development. So I'm happy to drop in on this. We've been working in the Amazon and connecting land stewards, indigenous land stewards, and capital for a number of years now, and happy to share how we do that. So one of the things I want to share out of the gates is that the problem today isn't so much that ecological data, or the problem today is that ecological data, the credit and registry record, and buyer's disclosure all often live in separate silos that don't talk to each other. So every handoff is essentially an opportunity, unfortunately, for leakage around integrity. So interoperable infrastructure means that the proof travels with the asset, at least that's how we've designed it. So it's not in a PDF that someone emails later. So one of the key things that we decided early on in the architecture of how we built Regen Ledger and our technical stack is that we wanted to be a neutral public infrastructure, not necessarily another standard competing for projects, a public ecological ledger that any registry, methodology, or marketplace could plug into. So share a little bit more about what we built on the technical side. So as I mentioned, we're publicly governed ecological ledger. So we custom built for ecological accounting and claims. So we record issuance, ownership transfers, retirements, all transparently and immutably. So this prevents or credit from being silently double sold or double claimed, and anyone can audit the chain of custody. This is essentially the direct answer to how does integrity survive movement. We offer linked data standards, our interoperability layer, Regen's metadata standards, JSON LD mean the evidence, monitoring data, claims, project info is structured to be machine readable and portable across systems, not necessarily locked into one platform. This is what allows for integrity signals to move through the system without necessarily being rekeyed or and otherwise degraded. The claims and data are also anchored to the asset. This is key, right? So we tokenize the credits. So, and I'll explain more in a moment about the biocultural jaguar credit that we've been developing with the Shadamense community down in Ecuador. But this means that the MRV evidence, the community governance record, and the credit itself all stay linked together. So the story and the proof don't get severed from the tokenized credit itself. So we do have a live case. We've been working for years with an amazing coalition, Amazon Sacred Headwaters Alliance, Fundación Pachamama Alliance, IDB, Stokeness Futures, and others, and Regen Network, all supporting the Ashuar Shar Mensa community down in Ecuador in protecting approximately, in our pilot program, 10,000 hectares of jaguar habitat in the Ecuadorian Amazon. And this is a stewardship-based project, not a necessary carbon project. And I'm happy to report, as of a recent sale, we are now, since the launch in mid-2024, up to $132,000 worth of credits sold, and a good portion of that directly sent to the bank account of the community itself for supporting their indigenous stewardship. But the key about this credit a little bit more, it's a biodiversity contribution claim. It's not a carbon offset. So this is an important part. So oftentimes infrastructure is designed to carry a ton of carbon, but maybe can't carry a biostewardship or biocultural stewardship claim, as we call it. So the rails have to represent ecological and cultural value that doesn't reduce to a single fungible unit. So that's exactly the interoperability challenge and a credibility asset aligned with the IAPB framework and high-level principles for biodiversity credits. And the credit issued is tracked on Regen registry with revenue flowing on a transparent on splits so that the benefit sharing is part of the recorded integrity, not necessarily a side promise. So for the record, that split as of the community governance decision is now at 80-20, where the community is now receiving 80% of the revenue generated from the credits and the remaining 20% for administration and support with MRV and other activities. So some of the other areas that I want to make sure we drop into, which I think are opportunities, is that interoperability without sovereignty is just, in some ways, a faster way to extract data from communities. And the architecture has to let integrity move and let communities keep authority over their own data and decisions. We're not necessarily, this is our topic, but we've spent a fair amount of time around making sure that we can address issues of sovereignty and data privacy when it comes to working with indigenous communities to ensure that they have governance and control over that issue while still allowing the validation of certain activities to happen. And that, is a mix of being able to use zero knowledge and other activities that where we can hash an activity or immutably record that an activity has happened, but not necessarily, for example, give up like where a jaguar is being camera trapped, for fear of poaching, or that indigenous wisdom can be protected, or governance decisions, but still be able to audit and prove that decisions were made. So maybe just as we're kind of closing here, I think there are opportunities. There's something to be said where, do we need more technology, or do we have an opportunity really to adopt some more shared standards? So everyone is building their own silo with their own integrity claims. In some ways, the missing piece is the willingness to plug into common, open, neutral infrastructure instead of necessarily having more competing registries. And again, we've been part of this. We have our own registry system, but we've been trying to figure out how we can make it easy to flow claims and flow credibility and integrity between registries and between technological stacks. It's a challenge, and I understand why, but there is an opportunity there to think about standards to make sure that that happens in an easier way. And maybe in closing, I mean, something to maybe leave us with is, capital can't flow to what it can't see, and it can't trust what it can't trace. So our job, at least at Regen, or what we've prioritized, is to make ecological integrity legible and portable so that the trust survives the trip from a community in the Amazon all the way to corporate disclosure. So with that said, I'm happy to share more about Regen. I'll put in the chat as soon as I'm done here a link to the project page. You can see a little bit more background about the biocultural jaguar credits, and always, if people are interested in learning more about how we're doing it, what has worked, we've learned a ton of lessons, made mistakes, and are in constant in a learning position, and trying to build in public so that we can share what we've feel like we've done well and what we haven't done well with all of you as a shared learning community. So thank you for listening in.
Thank you so much, David, and love that posture of sharing failures, learnings, etc. Speaking kind of the chat that you were just mentioning, Tracey, Maena, David now, there's a few really interesting questions in there. They might be for you. So please take some time to just check them out and answer if possible. And might be able to kind of open up further conversation at the very, very end if time allows. But now we're moving on to the next and the last big block, which is ecosystem intelligence, where we're talking with Climate Ventures. But before that, Owen, please, from the Nature Tech Collective, please introduce this subject.
Amazing. Yeah. A lot of this is kind of piggybacking on the points that David was just making around the fact that capital can't flow to structures and organizations and geographies that aren't visible. And so this last section in the paper, we really wanted to cover, Brazil and especially the Amazon is becoming one of the most dynamic regions for nature-based solution innovation. But the ecosystem growth, the technology that's proliferating, the investment that is finding its way to the region is happening faster than coordination is. And so one of the biggest barriers facing this growth is not necessarily the absence of innovation. We know that technologies exist. It's the fragmentation of solutions and the limited visibility across ecosystems. And so there's this really important orchestrating role that has yet or needs to be played in this region. And scaling trusted environmental markets requires more than the actors themselves. It requires supporting ecosystems capable of connecting these actors with one another. Here to present a shining example of this orchestrating, coordinating role is Daniel from Climate Ventures. And so I'll pass it to you, Daniel. Thank you.
Thank you, Owen. And I think this is a great opportunity. We, from Climate Ventures, we have been observing and nurturing this ecosystem of nature-based solutions and businesses, not only around nature, but also climate solutions in general for the last 8 years. And our role, we work as a backbone organization to really help Brazil's transition towards this low carbon and regenerative economy. So with a very broad approach, and understanding that nature is critical, not only because Brazil still has a lot of standing forests. We have more than 80% of the standing Amazon. We have a lot of opportunities to be a leader in this market. But in the last I would say 5 years, we've been taking a deep dive into this new market, and we've been observing a lot of this fragmentation and silos. So the landscape that we see is, of course, in a moment where we have the regulated carbon market happening in Brazil, still a lot of uncertainty in terms of how the voluntary carbon market will be integrated and into this the regulated market. So there is a lot of trust issues from recent news, which I'm sure that many of you have seen over the last year. So the question of technology now is critical. We have reached a tipping point where with AI and a lot of the accessibilities from many of these nature techs, we have the capacity to monitor and verify the credibility of these projects in scale, but still with a lot of fragmentations in terms of different methodologies and different silos, which have been mentioned before. So as we see, one of our programs is a Nature Investment Lab, which is a joint effort, which Climate Ventures works as an executive secretariat, and it's a movement that was co-founded by the Brazilian Development Bank, BNDES, together with Banco do Brasil and Itaúsa, so some of the major banks in Brazil, together with Instituto Clima e Sociedade and GFENS. We've created this movement, which now has around 500 organizations taking part, with a common objective of unlocking finance to nature-based solutions. We have some of our partners from Amazon Investor Coalition, also from Capital for Climate. Here I can see at least a few of the people that have been working with us in this lab. So it's a big joint effort to try to unlock investments. And when we see the main challenges and opportunities that we see from ecosystem coordination perspective is that first, there's an urge to really help the project developers access amounts of capital which they have not been able to because of many different challenges related to the business models, right? So we've seen a lot of different business models, and the offtake agreements have been also a big challenge. So we have been working with many lawyers and also corporations which are interested in buying high integrity carbon credits to work on standardized offtake agreements. So this is really important to make sure that the business models can be funded, and also we understand that a lot of the business models here in Brazil, they need to combine different types of revenues so they can actually prove themselves commercially viable. So it's very difficult to find a project, especially when we talk about restoration credits that will be completely funded by only selling the carbon credits. So there must be, especially offtake agreements also related to the goods that are being produced. If they are working with agroforestry, if they are working with, they must have also the value chains structured in order to make this business model viable. So there is a huge effort now to try to create these blueprints and standardized business models. I think we've been working on that as well with the help of Capital for Climate, to really try to make these business models more appealing for investors, and also reduce the perception of risks associated to these innovative business models which we have been seeing. So one other thing that I would like to also mention here, and I think this is a huge opportunity, as I sense, this is a growing community, and I would love to see how such interesting work, from a carbon justice standard and equitable earth, for example, can be applied to our reality in Brazil, because the way we perceive is that we have kind of a small group of project developers that have been able to successfully develop projects and raise capital to run these projects, but these has been a very exclusive movement here in Brazil. We have been finding a lot of challenges to build capacity to kind of like not the large scale, but the medium scale project developers, which they have not, they don't have the experience of doing so. And especially when we look at involving communities, and my background is a lot on working with governance and participation of local indigenous communities, and also quilombolas and riverine communities in Brazil. We see that these populations are almost completely excluded from the perspective of being competitive carbon credits. Of course, when we look at the indigenous lands, and we look at Amazon, we have a lot of problems with the rule of law and also the land regulation. A lot of lands are in dispute, or these are lands that also belong to the federal government. So there have been some projects that were pioneers in trying to generate business models with taking the risks of land regulation in account. But we have a lot of opportunities, especially when we look at the quilombola communities. We have more than 5,000 quilombola communities in Brazil, with huge areas of, and they are entitled. Most of these communities, they have the title of the land, so they could be developing projects with blue carbon, for example. In the mangroves, we have huge areas of mangroves across Brazil, but we are not seeing this companies thrive as fast as we would like to. So I think that there's a good moment now, because we have a political will, we have good regulations here in the Brazilian market, and we have a lot of international partners interested in supporting either the development of these projects, or also development of these markets, bringing investments and also buyers from all over the world to high integrity carbon. So I think there is a lot of opportunity to really work together and help to build capacity for these indigenous and local communities to develop high integrity carbon credits. So yeah, this is a little bit what I was planning to say. I'm very happy that we launched this first report, because we have a lot of good examples of corporations and companies that are delivering tangible solutions. I would love to invite you all to be part of the Nature Investment Lab. We have open meetings. Sometimes they are online meetings, that we have some also in-person meetings. There will be a few events that will be running in London Climate Week. So you can reach me if you are there and you are interested in meeting. And I think we have a few moments. This is a very qualified audience, so I would love to see if we have also questions from all the audience to all the other panelists. And thank you very much for the invitation. And we look forward to collaborate with some of you to develop great projects, not only in Brazil, but throughout the Pan-Amazonia.
Thank you so much, Daniel. Echo that this feels like the right moment and the right community to make some of this happen. So yeah, getting kind of to the final moments. And if Bea and I can get through this fast, then we'll have 5 to 10 minutes for Q&A. So please post questions if you have any more. But Bea, you wanted to kind of start ending us on just potentially one final question.
Oh, well, I think that today, in today's conversation, we highlighted a few of the solutions, but in our report, we have a lot of the solutions explained. And beyond that, on Climate Ventures database and on Nature Tech database, we have a lot of different solutions to show up that those solutions in many cases already exist. They are out there. We have some pilots in the Amazon. And in some cases, they just need this highlight, this type of connection to scale to increase the environmental protection. And we see that we have multiple layers of integrity infrastructure. But when we talk about the integrity challenges in the Amazon, they are not only technological challenges. In some cases, we have, as we were talking before, rights-based approaches challenges, governance challenges, ecosystem building challenges. So I would like to ask everybody to make a small reflection about what is your role in this. And at the same time, I would like to invite our panelists to give a little overview about what you guys think that is the single biggest barrier preventing those integrity-focused solutions from scaling across the Amazon, and what kind of coordination or ecosystem or infrastructure is still missing today. I would like to give a them page a little 1 or 2 minutes, just one sentence, so everybody answer it, so we can have more time for Q&A. Tracey, you would like to start?
Yeah, sure. I'm happy to start. And I think this has been mentioned by a number of the other speakers, but I think like a major barrier is around trust. There's trust from the buyer side, but also trust from communities. So many communities, given the years of critique and challenge of the voluntary carbon market, communities are consistently hesitant to engage in carbon markets because of their own experiences, because of what they've heard about the problems of existing projects, whether the projects are going to respect their rights, their governance systems, their development priorities. And at the same time, buyers really struggle with understanding if projects are really going to deliver on the social dimensions. I think there's been a lot of really excellent work, and we've heard about it, a lot of excellent work being done around baselines, around other areas of environmental integrity. But I do think that this kind of social integrity dimension is one that really requires a lot more attention beyond benefit sharing and safeguards. But I also want to highlight, and this has been raised in the report and it was also been mentioned here, that the importance of building an ecosystem of these different tools, of technologies, of the standards, of the methodologies, and better coordination. I really applaud this group for bringing this, for highlighting the way in which we can work more closely together. Because I do think that while social integrity is a really critical piece, that alone is not going to deliver high quality, robust carbon projects. We need the environmental integrity. We need the finance. We need the trust in the system, buyers to participate, monitoring project developers, and ultimately rebuilding trust in these nature-based projects will require all of these projects and all of us really working hand in hand. I really think this is the next frontier.
Amazing. Maena, you wanna give an overview?
Yes, no, I think on our side, it's actually something that we've discussed with our teams recently of, what's preventing us from just scaling our potential in the Amazon. And I think in this context specifically, it comes back to where the technology and trust in the Amazon report was highlighting, I think, as the first topic about territory and land tenure. And it's an extremely challenging environment for us to operate in. And to get clear, uncontested land tenure as the foundation of our project, and on which you can build social consensus, environmental integrity, and we still struggle. And I think that the report does a really good job at surfacing some of the organizations and platforms that are trying to bridge that gap specifically. But as we're working now, I think for us in this context of the Amazon, it still remains one of the areas where we're spending the most time. It's quite technical, access, remoteness, lack of digitalization, and also building the whole history of land tenure is quite costly and time consuming. So I don't think we've specifically talked about this today, but it's definitely a challenge that we're still facing.
Amazing. David or anyone else?
Yeah, I can go. Maybe I'm going to take a little different route. We just need a little bit of courage from the buyer side, right? I think we're the level of rigor and diligence, and I think the care that you hear in this community here is incredible, right? I mean, I think the effort to do things the right way, to go the extra mile to do the measurements. All of us are bootstrapping or, operating on shoestrings, and there's a mountain of capital and a bunch of hot air being floated around by the buying community, frankly, that they want to support indigenous-led stewardship. But so far the money is not flowing. And I think there's a little bit of this. I understand, in some ways, the large capital stacks at the end of the day are in a risk management position so often, right? They are worried about greenwashing. They're worried about being, making the front page of the Guardian, or for investing in something that didn't do what it said it was going to do. And I totally understand the fear of that, but we don't have a bunch of time to sit idle and be fearful. I think with due credit to the Biodiversity Credit Alliance and the Nature Tech Collective and all the actors here, Sea Mines and IDB and all the folks who are putting their money where their mouth is, we really need to focus on cultivating and caring for a group of large buyers and capital interests, and really form capital around indigenous-led stewardship and create the container that they can operate with grace and compassion, knowing that if they're looking for perfection, it's not going to be there. I think we at this time are more than directionally correct. That we have detailed structures, we have auditability, we have transparency, we have governance. We're doing, I think it feels like everything possible. We just need some courage. So wherever that looks like, that's what I'm interested in facilitating.
Amazing. Great answers for me. Thanks.
Do you want me to answer the question?
No, I finished it
Gotcha.
already
Oh,
with
sorry. I thought
my
maybe Daniel would. Um,
I can bring some inputs and our perspective, because we are working try to also induce the demand for these high integrity credits. It's such a big challenge. I don't see a lot of courage coming from the the boards and the decision makers that are so there is still a lot of fear ruling the market, and I think that I hope that this will change over the next year, because as the reasons I mentioned. So I think that the regulation of the local carbon markets are a very important step, and also this movement of really try to create the financial models of, so that a nature asset can all be transformed into an economic and a financial asset. This is critical to make the business models more viable, because otherwise, if the business model is not viable, the risk of really delivering those credits in the long terms are just too big. And from what we sense here, and we have a few examples of financial instruments that were, for example, the Brazilian Climate Fund, which has something like $2 billion ready to being invested in business models for ecological restoration in Brazil. Brazil has this huge aim of restoring 12 million acres of degraded lands, and the perception is that even the project developers that have been able to get their projects technically approved to receive this capital, they have not been able to get guarantees or insurances, so then they cannot actually access the capital. So we're working on guarantee structures, on blended finance mechanisms to really try to de-risk all this. And I believe that, of course, that I would love to, find more courageous decision makers that are able to, trust all on these new solutions. But from a perspective of who's observing this market for almost 20 years, I believe that we really need to have the business models working, even though if they're not like exponentially like a venture capital attractive, but to prove that they will be able to pay back, the loans and really, get the, especially when we talk about ecological restoration, we're talking about a lot of high intensity, activities that will require a lot of immediate, machinery and heavy uses of capital to really start the process of land restoration, and they will take 30 to 40 years sometimes to completely pay back the loans. So these financial structures and reliable business models, in my opinion, are in the center of bringing credibility to the market. And well, I'm glad we have a lot of partners that are also helping to connect the dots to make the investments move. So yeah, it's I have like this kind of
Yeah.
optimistic, but we need to be also very pragmatic in terms of scaling this market. So
Amen to that, Daniel. So yeah, just to kind of close all of this up, today's webinar hopefully showed that the Amazon most definitely does not lack innovation. There are hundreds of organizations already building solutions addressing all of the buckets that we just talked about: governance, MRV infrastructure, predictive intelligence, interoperability, market architecture. But what I hope today also reinforced is that integrity specifically is not built in isolation by any single technology. It's built through ecosystems of transparency, of participation, of coordination, of trust, ecosystems like this. And it should come as really no surprise that this is one of the core and kind of lasting messages we want to leave with here today. So whilst our technology and trust in the Amazon report helped map the emerging ecosystem of integrity infrastructure, what this webinar also tried to do is to take this messaging one step further. We mapped the ecosystem, and now we need to deepen its connective tissue. The future of integrity in environmental markets will depend on many things. Standards and methodologies, of course, a lot of what you've all said, infrastructures, partnerships, governance systems, coordination networks. And so really that brings us to like the last ask of you before we close. We, together with the Amazon Investor Coalition, Nature Tech Collective, will be establishing and hosting a dedicated forum or a working group of sorts for nature tech in the Amazon. It's going to be a permanent space within NTC focused specifically on innovation, on governance and integrity ecosystems, like we've been discussing today. So it's a place basically where the conversations that were started in the report and the webinar can continue, can deepen, and can translate into further coordination around specific issues that we deem are the most pressing or actionable. So Owen is going to be pasting 2 links in the chat. The first one is where you can kind of contribute to further mapping of this ecosystem to technologies for the Amazon. And the second one is just to sign up to this ongoing conversation if you'd like to be part of it. It will be defined with you, so there's not much context except sign up, I'm interested, and in conversation we'll figure out where we go. But yeah, Hopefully what you'll have gotten from today is that the report mapped the ecosystem. This conversation is deepening some of it, and we're continuing this conversation. Please do sign up if you're interested. Thank you so much to Daniel, Maena, David, Bea, Tracey, Owen, and all of the audience for being here today.